Congratulations, you have a rough draft of your novel, or you've finished your novel, and now you're at the stage where you get to make it even better. And today we're going to help you with the three most important questions that you absolutely have to ask to make sure that your novel is consistent and your readers can suspend their disbelief and fall into the pages. Hi, I'm Morgan.
This is Molly.
And I'm Teresa.
And we're the Semi Sages of the Pages, and we're authors, and we're sponsored by an incredible printing press called No Bad Books Press. So if you're an author, as you finish your novel, make sure you submit to us or learn more about our books. So today we're going to talk about consistency. And the first rule for consistency is, drum roll please, world building. If you are a fantasy writer, a horror writer, or a sci-fi writer, lean in. This is a little more important for you than for the other. That's right, Oliver. Thank you for that. This is a little more important for our spec fic audience because, of course, we get to deal with magic or advanced technology, maybe time travel or ghosts or monsters. And all we're saying in this is really important. Once you've finished your novel, either you or your beta readers, probably both, need to read to make sure that you don't have inconsistencies in the world. So Molly, give us an example as an author who's got to deal with inconsistencies in your world. Tell us your story.
Yeah, so the latest book that I was working on and I was going through the editing process, I had an awful time. Awful is not quite the right word, but an interesting, lovely time because I have a ghost in this novel and realized I was inconsistent about if my characters could touch the ghost or they could how they could interact with the ghost. And I had some character or some chapters where like they could touch him and he could touch them, and some characters were or chapters where they couldn't, and it made things very confusing and didn't hold consistent, and it made my readers think that there was some mystery thing happening behind the scenes, that like, oh, what's the reason? Is there extra stuff going on? There was no extra stuff. I just wasn't consistent, and I didn't want to distract them from hopefully the lovely plot and characters in my book by them thinking that there was stuff going on that there really wasn't. It was just confusing, and I just needed to simplify and bring it all together.
Now, what can our authors do to prevent that from happening? Because you were in the beta readers phase when that got caught.
Yeah, I think there's many things you can do. One, keeping good notes about what you're doing, whether that means that you plot beforehand or while you're writing, you're keeping good notes about like, hey, they can do this, or the character's hair color is this, or the room is located on the third floor. I know people who have made maps. Even if you don't world build in a speculative fiction world, you're world building in our world. Okay, is the cafeteria in the same place every time? I had a thing where, if I write in the real world, which I do sometimes, and I say like it took them 3 hours to go from here to there, I go and plot out like, okay, this is where they started. Like real world, this is where they started, even if I don't mention it in the book. And real world, this is where they ended. I Google Maps. I make sure that that's consistent.
And pro tip, if you're writing fantasy or sci-fi and there are basic rules of magic or like futuristic technology, it's really, really important to lay the basic foundation for that starting as early as page 1. And you see that in some of the best dystopian books, like 1984, when the clock strikes 13. Like something as simple as those little tiny details, they create buy-in, but they also start to expand the environment. Because one thing that's really difficult, I can tell you as a reading specialist, it's really difficult for readers when they start getting images in their head and then you ask them to change them radically.
Mm-hmm.
So the earlier you can create the image that is the one you want, the more likely they are to fall in love with the book. Number 2.
All right, that's your character consistency. So Morgan kind of alluded to this already about eye color, scars, angel kisses, that type of thing, but it's more than that too. Sometimes you get halfway through your book and you introduce a brand new character and you don't even realize that you never introduced them earlier, or that they needed to be a part of your book earlier. Or you have way too many characters and they're all fulfilling the same purpose. I will tell you, in real life, we have many, many friends. Many of us have many best friends. In a book, you need one.
I'll give you a real life. I'm sorry, Teresa, I'm going to put you on the spot here, but I'm going to give you a real life example of when I beta read for one of Teresa's books. I remember I got confused in a scene because the scene started with a plumber. I believe his name was like Ted. And then halfway through the scene, there were two plumbers, and it was
Bill and Ted.
Bill and
Bill
Ted.
and Ted.
And
Because I
I was
used them as I used those names as a placeholder.
As placeholder, yeah.
Totally
And I was like, wait
forgot.
a second.
That's
How are there?
funny.
Where did the second plumber come from? And just silly things like that. You just need fixing. Or name consistency. You call a character one thing, one place, their name changed. You have a character that starts in the beginning and then never shows back after a third way through the book, right? Things like that where you're like, okay, maybe I don't need this character at all if they never come back.
Yeah.
Those
Or
kind of
characters appearing or disappearing out of scenes. How many times have we read a book and we're like, wait, when did that character get here? Last thing, make sure your characters don't sound alike. That's a very, very common problem. You want to make sure they have not just distinct dialogue, but distinct movements, distinct mannerisms, and just that they're very different from each other. Because again, people will confuse your characters. And if people are like, wait, who's that character? Aren't they the same as that one person? Then your characters are not different enough from each other.
And to that point, we're talking about consistency. So if
Mhm.
the kind of trope of that character is humorous, they can't lose their humor halfway through the book.
Right.
I think we're into the third and final one.
I think so. Morgan.
And this one might be what you're thinking of. But this one is actually plot consistency, right? Which is different than the world building. But this is right. If you start at the story where they're looking for a thingamajig, and they say the thingamajig does XYZ, it's going to blow up the planet. And then halfway through the book, your characters have stopped looking for it, but it's called something else. But they've gotten sidetracked, and you're like, wait a second. Those are like big problems that it's sometimes very easy to see, especially through a read through. You're like, oh, this doesn't make sense. This is inconsistent. I just need to bring this together. But sometimes the smaller ones can be hard, right? Like, have you ever watched a movie and you ever thought, why didn't the characters just go into the other room? Why didn't the characters just, the one that gets me a lot is plots that are caused by unrealistic miscommunications.
Yes.
So you're like, why didn't the character just talk to the other character?
Why didn't nice? Rom-coms are good.
They are, but that's a really common one where you're like, oh, for crying out loud, if you guys had just called each other up and been like, hey, wait a minute here, you wouldn't have even had a book, which is probably why.
The most common rom-com trope, I think. And if that's your trope, go for it. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
It's nothing wrong if you are intentionally doing that trope, right? If you find yourself a reason in a moment where like, oh crap, they could have solved this whole thing by never leaving home and just baking a cake. I don't know. I don't know what your book is or whatever. But like, if you look back, and this can be really hard for you to see, because you have this epic idea of whatever it was, and you have this idea of how your character solves the problem. So this is when other people can really come in clutch, right? Where they can say, hey, I don't understand. Why did they go through this convoluted thing to save their mom? Why didn't they just do XYZ? And then you either change your plot or change your book so that they do the easier thing, or you make it so that easier thing isn't easier. It won't work. Why don't they just fly the ring to Mordor and dump it in Mount Doom with the eagles? Oh, because the Nazgul will just Sauron will see them coming from a mile away because it's a giant eye, and the Nazgul will come over and kill the eagle, so that won't work. Great.
For people that are like,
Now we know.
what? This is Lord of the Rings, guys.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got 2 ways to help make that easy. First, if you need awesome beta readers, jump on our Discord because we have an amazing community and it's a great way to hook up with people who might be able to help you find those plot holes. And second, our friend Teresa, head editor at No Bad Books Press, has a great tip that she gave me and it helps me all the time. And that is have your book read out loud to you. And don't stare at the pages, like walk around, get away from the screen and listen. And that is some of the very best ways to find plot holes that you didn't see before because you're going to hear them.
Exactly.
And with that, we hope that you got a lot about the 3 basic questions you asked for consistency. Is your world, your magic, your location consistent? Are your characters, their dialogue and their description consistent? And maybe not most importantly, but very importantly, is your plot consistent? We hope you like this episode. And if you want to learn more about getting your book from the beginning idea all the way through the end, please keep checking out this series. And Teresa, what else can they do?
Go on our Discord. Come hang out with us on our Discord. It's fabulous. And we've got the Race to Rejection.
That's right.
Where when you submit, if you get a rejection, you've got a bunch of cheerleaders being like, keep going. That was awesome. And if you get the most rejections in a year, you might win a prize. Don't know.
You're
But come
gonna
join
win a
us on our
prize.
Discord. Anyways, go right. Take care. Bye now.